How are you, Brian? Good to see you.
And to see you too.
Thank you for tuning in to us today for this conversation, which is one in a series of conversations we do. And today we introduce Mr. Brian Cullen, and I'm sure you'll find his story interesting and intriguing. And we're glad today that Brian has invited us into his home, his beautiful house that is situated on the shores of Lough Derg, just outside the village of Killadoo. And he lives here with his wonderful wife, Eleanor, and the dog, which I'm not sure what his name is, but however. So Brian has agreed to do this interview, and thank you, Brian, for agreeing to come on board with this series of interviews which we do with people in motorsport. To get straight into it, how did you start? Where was your interest in motorsport? Where did it happen?
Right. Well, Donal, the dog's name is Nico, called after Nico Rosberg.
Very good.
I started because my dad had a keen interest in motorsport, and he would take me to races in the Curragh and Bray, Dundrod, and I had a fascination for Stirling Moss. I remember being at Dundrod when he won the TT in the C-type Jaguar, and we were in the docks in Belfast the next day, and the cars were there awaiting shipment back to England, and I sat into his winning Jaguar.
Very good.
And I always had a great interest. My dad was very involved in the Limerick Motor Club, and then I thought I'd never reach 17 to get a driving license. Mm-hmm. And on my 17th birthday, I had a 10-shilling note, and I went into the post office, and I walked out with a license to drive articulated vehicles and trucks and every kind of motor vehicle available.
So what era was this? What year are we talking about here when you were, say, going up to Dundrod with your dad?
I suppose I was about 5 or 6 or thereabouts. I was born in 1943, so I'm just about to be 80. I'm beginning to feel it.
Yeah, and this was you were born in Limerick?
In Limerick, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And but you told me heretofore that your grandfather then, they had a garage business in Limerick City.
That's right.
Or a coach building, actually.
Coach building. Christie Coach Builders. They were famous particularly for their carts. But then they also went into motoring when the horseless carriage came along. They had a garage in O'Connell Street, Upper O'Connell Street, and for the Limerick Grand Prix, 1930s, their garage was used as the main paddock for the race. And my mum collected autographs from all the top drivers of the day,
yeah,
which I sold recently to a collector in Australia.
Very good. And do you think that it was in your genes then, basically, the motor trade, the racing, that you eventually got involved in?
No doubt, yeah. I could never wait for Autosport to come out every week, and by the time I had my license and then decided to go race myself, I had a company Mini Cooper, and I announced to my dad that because I was now in the insurance brokerage business with Dad, I announced that I was going to race in the Phoenix Park.
Okay.
And his reply was, well, not in the company car. So Eric McNamara in Limerick was the NSU dealer, and I convinced him to lend me an NSU Prince 4. And I went with that to the Phoenix Park.
So he was a Limerick NSU dealer.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Des Cullen, no relation, although we call him uncle, used to come down to visit Eric, and he'd say to me, "Come on, we'll go out on the road and do some test trial practicing." Good days.
Was that your first motorsport event then, the Phoenix Park with the NSU?
My first race.
Your first race?
I had the Mini Cooper, and that was a supercar because you could drive to Belfast, put on the numbers, do the Circuit of Ireland, back to Belfast, take the numbers off, drive home, and use the car to visit my clients the next day again.
So you used to rally that car because the rallying those days was different to the rallying of today.
Yes, it was, a series of tests and navigational in between. And then I autocrossed it, hill climbed it. It was a super little all-round car and quite competitive at everything it did.
Okay. Was that a Cooper S or a Cooper?
No, just a Cooper. 997, I think.
Yeah, 997, yeah. Very good. So then you had a number of saloon car races, I think, before you actually got into the single-seaters. My
only aim was to get into single-seaters. There was a great race in the park for standard production saloons up to 900cc. And it's another story about how my Lotus 20 came to a bitter end. And in the production saloon race, I drove my sister's Fiat 850 and won.
And did she know you were driving it?
Well, she did, yeah. And when I managed to blow the engine in practice, she wasn't very happy. But some friends got together, and during the night rebuilt the engine, ran the car in, and put a notice on the car, running in, please pass.
Yeah, yeah. And how did you do in that race?
I won it in almost a dead heat finish. I think we were given the same time, but I had half an inch in front.
And there were some celebrities driving in that race, wasn't there?
Yes. It was quite a popular event. And then the following year, Fiat gave me an 850 to use, which I won again.
Was that totally an 850 race, a Fiat 850 race?
No.
Oh.
The main competition came from the Hillman Imps.
When you got that win in the Phoenix Park, which is a major thing to get because, you know, everybody's proud of a win in the Phoenix Park, did you kind of realise then that maybe you had a bit of a talent here?
Well, I thought in the very beginning I might be world champion in a few years' time.
Okay.
How stupid one can be.
Well, with the opportunities, who knows?
Well, I knew it would be great fun along the way, and it certainly was.
Yeah.
I would hate to have missed the experiences that I later on enjoyed.
So you had a number of cars which you competed with, and the NSU Prince, the Mini Cooper, and you had a Triumph Spitfire.
I had, and I put a supercharger on it, and I'd ordered from Speedwell a special link for the back suspension because it had a habit of tucking the back wheels in on cornering, but it hadn't come when the race started. And there's a lovely photo of me in Dunboyne with the front wheels on the track and the back wheels about 10 feet in the sky.
Now, you raced that car in Dunboyne, you raced it in Rathdrum, I think.
Yes.
And anywhere else?
No, I think then I bought my first single-seater, the Lotus 20.
That was short-lived, obviously. And what era, what years are we talking about here? Your saloon car experience, we'll say.
My saloon car experience probably ended about 65.
You were always wanted to drive a single-seater. So when did the transition take place then?
I think it was about 66 when I got the Lotus.
Okay.
It was...
now, the Lotus 20 was a Formula Junior car.
That's right.
And for the listeners, what was Formula Junior at the time?
You were meant to be able to buy a car complete for £1,000. If another competitor offered you more than £1,000, you had to sell it to them.
Okay.
So they were very competitive. 1,000 cc's.
And what engines did they run?
A production, usually a Ford Anglia.
Oh yeah, the under 1,000 cc, obviously the 997,
yes.
998 actually.
998,
I think it was.
Yeah.
Was that the Screamer engine they commonly known?
No, that came later.
Oh, okay. When you bought that car, it had this 998. It was a Formula Junior car.
Yes.
That Lotus 20. And where did you race that, or hill climb it, or what did you do with it?
My first event was the Lisdon-Nevada hill climb. I can't remember much more, but I do remember being racing at Bishop's Court.
Okay.
And I got a smell of kind of sulphur at one stage going very fast. and I should have recognised it as a bearing about to go, but it did, and the Conrod was never found since.
So when you say get back to the hill climb scene, Ballyvaughan, was that actually the corkscrew, or?
Ballyvaughan was another hill.
Oh, it's a different hill.
Run by the Galway Club.
Yeah.
Lisbonvarna was mostly run by Limerick.
Oh, right.
But they were very good hills. Ballyvaughan was exceptionally nice.
Yeah, when you say
nice
Ballyvaughan, though, was that actually the corkscrew at the time?
No.
No.
Lisbonvarna was the corkscrew.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
So between Ballyvaughan and Lisdoonvarna, obviously.
Yeah.
So that Formula Junior car, then you raced it in the Phoenix Park.
Yeah.
Did you?
At this stage, I wasn't happy with the smaller engine, and a very good friend, Dennis Hogan from Adair, said, well, I've got a 1600 engine. If we fit that, it will make the car go faster.
Yeah.
And it certainly did. But the car design was such that there was no upper link in the back suspension. The drive shaft formed the top link as well as the drive shaft. And the extra power, I remember going down the back of the park towards the zoo area, which was actually the fastest point of the circuit, faster than the main straight down to Mountjoy.
So you were going down to Mountjoy and turning right.
That's right.
It was a right-hand course.
It was a gradual curve to the right, but it was actually quicker than the main straight.
Wow.
And behind me was a Lola T70, being driven by a chap from Jersey, Trevor Sargent. Now, this was a big V8 Lola.
Sports car.
Sports car.
Yes.
Yeah. And my rev counter had stopped working, and I was afraid of over-revving, and I saw Sargent behind me, so I thought I better slow down a bit and get off the throttle. And as I did, the backlash, I suppose, on the drive shaft caused universal joint to break. And I remember hitting the railings of Oris and Newthorne. Now, this was before breakfast. In those days, practice was held early in the morning so as not to disrupt the city traffic.
Oh, yes.
A bit like Monaco. And I remember hitting the railings, and then I remember going down the road with sparks flying and pressing the brake pedal and wondering why the car wasn't stopping.
Yeah.
I'd only one wheel, road wheel at that time. So that was written off completely.
Okay.
And
do you have any photographs of that or anything that you could show me?
I don't know whether I should, but that one maybe explains it.
Yeah, that looks like it's totaled.
It was total.
So did you suffer injuries in that crash?
No, I didn't. And the cars were pretty unsafe in those days. There were space frame chassis. You were sitting in an aluminium tank around you, and no real roll bar. They were lethal, really.
And what kind of a top speed now would you have been would that car have been capable of it?
It wouldn't have been that high, probably 140 miles per hour.
Yeah, well, high enough considering the tubular steel chassis I'm looking at there, which doesn't look very substantial.
Yes.
But of course, Colin Chapman wanted to build his car as light as possible.
His philosophy was it should fall apart when he crossed the finishing line.
Yeah.
Sometimes it did before it crossed the finishing line.
That was a second-hand car for you, was it? It wasn't a new car?
No, it was owned by a chap called David Popplewell in Dublin.
Okay.
I bought it from him.
So it was in Ireland, it was raced in Ireland before yourself?
Yeah.
So, your car was a write-off, you've lost that car. Where did you go from there?
Well, Terry Balfe was the Shell representative, and he came to me and said, Brian, if you're replacing your car, let me know. So, of course, Monday morning I did, and he offered me, I think it was 50% of the price of replacement.
Wow.
And a chap called Jackie Davidson in Belfast had a very nice Crosslé, I think it was a 6F, and with a 1500 engine, very nice car. So I bought that.
Okay. And what class of car, I mean, where was that fitting into, or was it just a Libra kind of a...
It would have been Libra, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is free formula basically, so anything goes.
Yes.
So, I mean, if you had a Formula 1 car of the day, you could actually drive that in races in Ireland.
You could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did you race that car then, or did you race competitively?
I raced it pretty well and hill climbed it. I managed to break quite a lot of hill climb records, some of which still stand because you haven't had a chance to go on the same hills. Otherwise, you pinched all my records in the other hills.
Yeah. And who were the?
I forgive you for that.
Who were the other competitors? I mean, was anybody famous? I mean, even within Ireland, driving the hills at the time.
Richie Healy, who had a supercharged Lotus.
Yeah, famous motor dealer from Malahide.
That's right. He would be my closest competitor. Alec Poole in the Hornet at one stage. Paddy Hopkirk. Gosh, I'm sure there are lots more names.
Yeah. Frank Keane, was Frank Keane out there?
Frank Keane, very much so.
Yeah. Because he was a good hill climb racer, that guy.
He was. He had a Lotus 18 with an Alfa Romeo twin cam engine.
Okay. Yeah, you did a lot of hill climbing, which was a dangerous sport in itself, especially in single seaters, because there was very limited protection. But I did notice that some people drove with the bodywork off the car.
In anticipation of swiping a stone wall, it was going to be something less to replace.
Okay, yeah, good thinking. They didn't look very pretty though, that's the only thing.
No, but...
So, the 6F then, did you race that?
I did, yes, and I won the Sexton Trophy racing car section with it.
Well, achievement in itself, because that trophy is well sought after today even.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
So, okay, that was the 6F. And then, next up, what did you do? We were talking about 60s, late 60s now?
Yes. About 67, I think, I bought a Lola T60. This was quite a step up. It had a monocoque chassis, inboard front suspension, and just the twin cam Ford engine. But I fell foul of the scrutineers at the first event, which was in a scary hill climb, because it had been designed for the Ford Screamer engine that you mentioned, and it was offset slightly. So when I got the car...
So the engine itself was offset over to one side,
Yeah. The collection of the car was a story in itself. I bought it from Rob Lamplow, who was quite a famous driver at the time and even to this day. And he said the car was in London and I could come and collect it, but be sure to bring cash.
Bring cash.
Yeah. So I travelled over to London to Adam and Eve Muse and knocked at the door, and this very attractive girl came out and said, "Oh, Brian, Rob's told me you were coming, but he's racing in France at the moment."
Okay.
So she said, "Well, I'll get you the car." So we went down to the dungeons, and the car was with about 20 other cars in little tiny pieces and different boxes here, there, and everywhere. So I had to literally find all the pieces that I could eventually assemble into a proper racing car.
Okay.
And then...
and who was helping you out? Like, you didn't do that yourself now, put the car together yourself?
Just pals.
Oh, yeah.
Cecil Bradshaw, he was a great friend and became my sort of mechanic, and Basil Martin and Limerick.
You were in trouble with scrutiny, you mentioned, because I want to get back to that.
Oh, yes.
The scrutiny prior to the hill climb.
At the hill climb.
Yeah.
Yeah. A very good friend of mine, Dickie Lovellbutt.
Yes.
I'm sure people will remember
Well, I remember him from the Phoenix Park, the Lovellbutt Special.
That's
V8,
right.
Big V8.
He used to be Bobby Baird's mechanic, the Belfast Telegraph, and he used to drive Ferraris in Formula One.
Oh.
Dickie built the LB Special, so he engineered a little spacer and welded it on the drive shaft to make up the gap.
Yes.
And
because obviously with the engine canted or over to one side, the gearbox was also offset to a point.
So the drive shaft was too
modified.
short. Yeah. So the scrutineers, scrutineer in particular, said no, that you can't race with a welded drive shaft.
Yeah.
And it became a question of, well, if Dickie Lovellbutt says it's okay, to me it's okay, and I'm not I'm not going to take your word against Dicky's.
You were a brave man.
I was brave and stupid, yeah.
Were you sent home by any chance?
No, but at Mondello, it was the same scrutineer, and he said, I told you I wouldn't pass it again. So I didn't get to drive the Lola in the first Mondello race, but I still had the Crosslé, so I drove that.
Okay, yeah, got the 6F. Crosslé
the 6F, yeah.
Okay, but that was the first race in '69 in Mondello, is that right?
I think it was even earlier. Was it 68?
Or 60? Yeah, 68,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
So I had no trouble in any of the Irish hill climbs other than in Dublin. The Cork scrutineer is quite happy, all the others. So I was a bit pig-headed, I suppose, and I decided, well, if I can't race in Ireland, I'll race abroad.
Okay.
And I went to Hockenheim to race it in a Formula 2 race.
This is with the Lola?
With the Lola,
Yeah.
Which was only a twin cam. It really wasn't a Formula 2 car. It had been a Formula 2 car being driven by a chap called Eric Offenstadt, who was a world champion motorcyclist.
Okay. So, I mean, how did you make that major leap from, I mean, we could say you might take the car to the UK, but you go off to Hockenheim as your first international event.
Yes, yeah.
Now, what series were you racing? What was that series?
That was a full International Formula 2
International
race.
Formula 2.
Yeah. Now, the grids then were a bit tight, so you could take part with the twin cam in it. Not competitive, obviously.
Make up the numbers, in other words.
Make up the numbers.
Yes.
But it was the race following the race that Jim Clark had been killed in.
Oh,
And
in Hockenheim.
In Hockenheim. I remember each time I'd go around the back and still see the damage to the trees where his car.
Oh, was that actually that race weekend?
No, the previous one, maybe just a month earlier.
Yeah, yeah.
But I quite enjoyed it because instead of getting hassle, I was actually welcomed, and I enjoyed the atmosphere of the international race.
And of course, with your hill climbing experience, the fact that there was trees and banks and walls around you on the racetrack probably didn't disturb you too much.
No.
How did you do? I mean,
I did quite well, considering that it wasn't a competitive car for a full Formula 2, but it gave me a taste. And
before we leave that one, how did you manage to get a car from? I'm sure there was no roll-on, roll-off ferries that time. So how did you get the car from Limerick to Hockenheim?
Well, you would have to go Dublin to Liverpool, I think, on a ferry, and then drive down through the UK and across the English Channel.
And were the cars lifted on that time, or what?
No, you could drive on.
Oh, there was actually a drive on?
Yeah.
Okay.
But an amusing little incident was I didn't have a transporter. So you might remember a chap called Bosco O'Brien.
I do.
Demolition Ireland.
Yeah.
He had a Volkswagen pickup, which were quite popular in those days for carrying racing cars.
Yeah.
And he said, look, take my pickup to Hockenheim. So I arrived in Hockenheim with Demolition Ireland.
Oh.
Written in big lettering on the...
I'm sure that frightened off a lot of the other drivers.
I think it did. It certainly made the headlines. But it was very good at Bosco.
Yeah. That gave you a taste probably for, further adventures.
Yes.
Abroad.
Yes. But obviously I needed a proper Formula 2 car. And there was a Brabham BT23C, which had been ex-Winkleman team, Jochen Rindt and Alan Rees, came in the market because Bill Ivey, the world champion motorcyclist, had been killed in a motorcycle race.
That's right, I remember that.
And his car became available. Frank Williams actually had it for sale. And
so that was Bill Ivey was going to take that car?
Yes, he had raced it in a few races and done very well with it, even though it was a year old in the formulas.
Yeah.
But it came with his shoes. So I can always say I raced it in the shoes of Bill Ivey.
Oh, and do you still have those shoes?
Unfortunately, I only have one. I can't find the other.
Yeah. Interesting. And why was the shoe significant?
Well, I have a small foot, and Bill Ivey had a small foot, so they fitted perfectly.
Oh, yeah. So they just gave him along with the...
Like Cinderella.
My God. And what engine had that car got?
That had a proper Formula 2 FVA.
2 litre.
1600.
1600, okay.
It was effectively half the Formula 1 V8
DFV.
DFE double four valve.
Yeah, which was, of course, the winning Formula 1 engine at the time.
It's been the most successful engine ever in Formula 1.
Yeah.
Ford got Cosworth, I think they, for £1 million, which was a lot of money then, Cosworth had to build Formula 1 engines, but first a Formula 2 engine as a proving engine. So it was a very powerful, beautiful, smooth, high-revving engine.
Yeah.
I think I paid £1,000 for the chassis and 500 for an FVA engine.
Okay.
And I was given sponsorship by Ford, 2 jackets and some stickers. And I don't know if there was any cash involved, but Dunlop gave me £250. That was a lot of money in 1970.
Yeah. Was it half the price of an engine?
Yes, exactly. And they gave me a set of wet tyres and a set of dry tyres. And this sort of, when you compare then and now, it's really laughable. In a Formula 2 race now, they would probably go through 20 sets of tyres in one event. Mm-hmm. I had the same tyres at the end of the season as at the beginning. And I never used the wets. We never had a wet race.
Yeah. And all the Formula 1 drivers, or the Formula 2, even Formula 2 today, all they have to do is do a lock-up and they're in and they change the tyres because they're flat-spotted.
Exactly, yeah.
So which I'm sure you do plenty of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, they used to, the Firestone chaps who most of the teams were using, they were always absolutely in hilarious laughter that I still had my same
set of tyres.
Yeah.
So
But
that was 1970?
1970.
70.
Yeah.
And did you do a full series then, a full championship?
I did, yes, pretty well. I was very lucky because by now,
Was that
racing...
the time, sorry, was that the time, was it Hockenheim you arrived? Oh, no. With the new, you had a transporter, a Thames transporter.
Yeah.
Was that the following year?
No, it was then. My whole setup to do International Formula 2, which of course would bring me into Formula 1 and World Championship,
Yeah.
was based on that second-hand Brabham, the bit of sponsorship that I got, and Ford, Dunlop and Shell.
Okay.
Shell gave me £250. I paid £90 for a Thames pickup truck and converted it, cut the chassis, lengthened it, put an aluminium body on, and that was my transporter.
So this was Formula 2 on a shoestring?
Formula 2 on a shoestring, yeah.
Yeah.
But I was very lucky because I had done one race with that proper Formula 2 car in Germany, in Dachau, and did very well. I think I was third. Of a trophy which was presented by the Burgomaster of the Stat of Dachau. And because of that, I was approached by a very nice chap, Paul Watson, who was running motor racing developments, I think, and he was basically a manager. And he had Graham Hill on his books. Mm-hmm. So he could get me entries. By now, there are a lot of English drivers trying to make their way through Formula 2, and entries were hard enough to get. But I always got entries because Paul Watson go to an organiser and say, well, I've got Graham Hill, the world champion, and I've Brian Cullen from Limerick.
Up and coming Formula 1 driver.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I was very lucky.
Now, you might explain now that you mentioned Graham Hill, because a lot of the viewers today wouldn't realise that the Formula 1 drivers of the day raced in Formula 2 as well.
That's right. All the top drivers raced in Formula 2. To name a few, Emerson Fittipaldi, who became a great friend, Graham, obviously, Jackie Hicks, Helmut Marko, Red Bull fame, John Watson, you almost name a top driver of that period, and they were competing in the same race as me.
Well, that's
which is good for them.
extraordinary, yeah.
Yeah.
When you think about the level of talent that was there, because they were all very good drivers, obviously.
And all with state-of-the-art cars.
The best of equipment, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, the
And
first...
I'd say their tyres weren't a full season old either.
They wouldn't even get through one practice session, I'd say, on a set. But my mechanic was an amazing chap, Evan Hughes, school pal. And he was about to go to Australia. And I said, like, do a year with me first. And our first race was Truxton, International Easter Monday. And
that was a Formula 2 race as well, was it?
That was, yeah. At this stage now, it was all international level.
Okay.
And we pulled into the paddock and then pulled in beside us this huge big transporter. And then another one, Argentinian Formula 2 team, Carlos Reutemann and Carlos Pache.
Yeah.
And when they opened the doors, there were 4 brand new BT30, latest state-of-the-art Brabhams. In the next one, 2 more spare Brabhams and 6 spare Formula FEA engines and gearboxes. And then the third one was for hospitality.
Yeah.
And Evan said to me, Brian, I think we're out of our depth. We'll head for home. But we didn't, fortunately. And Evan went on to get very popular with the Lotus team, and Emerson Fittipaldi had just come into Formula 2. And I often told him he'd spend more time with Lotus than he did with me.
Yeah.
But I learned in recent years that Lotus were very scarce in mechanics. They only brought the very minimum and used other people to help them.
So I think you were saying earlier they literally had 3 mechanics with them.
Yes, to run 2 cars.
For run 2 cars, yeah.
Yeah. So when Emerson, when it was a very sad period in that fatalities in 1970 were quite common. There were 5 drivers in either Formula 2 or Formula 1 killed in 5 consecutive months that year. Piers Courage, Jochen
Yeah, it was a sad.
It was a sad
time.
A sad time. The cars were very, very, very dangerous, and the circuits were very dangerous. Very little Armco, very little runoff areas. But
And it seemed like the races continued then. They continued despite the fact there was major accidents.
Absolutely.
And the race was just completed.
There was no such thing as a red flag.
Yeah.
And you'd be passing by a crashed car for maybe another 20 laps, and you would know if the person was still alive or not.
Yeah. And what was the duration of the race then, normal race?
I'd say they were, I can't remember exactly, but an hour and a half.
So it was it was similar to today's Formula 1 or GP2, or Formula 2, sorry.
We didn't have pit stops, so maybe it wasn't quite that long, certainly over an hour.
Yeah. The reliability of the cars wouldn't have been like it is today.
Oh, absolutely not, no.
So how many would be on the grid then?
About 25,
Okay.
The average.
And probably would half them be dropouts, maybe?
Maybe not quite that much.
Yeah.
But you were always listening for strange noises and expecting any moment there'd be a problem with the car.
Now, okay, you've spoken about Germany racing there, but I know you've raced in a lot of countries in the world that it wasn't just a European series, it was a world series, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
So tell us, the listeners there, about the other countries you went to race.
Okay, well, some bizarre. The most bizarre one was Israel, where they had Ashkelon. It was being developed as a tourist area, but they had roads made, but no buildings. So they just used rope to control the crowd. And the race was meant to be held on a Saturday, but there was rioting because it was the Sabbath. So they had to change it to Sunday.
Yeah.
It was going to be a lethal event because for a saloon car race before the Formula 2 race, the crowd used to go through the ropes, and then as the cars were coming towards them, they'd stand out and then stand back as the car went past, and then stand back out again. Now, that was okay for some relatively slow saloons, but to run a Formula 2 race would have been lethal.
Yeah.
So we said to the organisers, look, this is too dangerous, we can't race. And they said, well, you have to, because if you don't, there'll be riots. So we came to a solution. Our mechanics had the transporter doors open. We formed up on the grid and pretended to do a start and a first lap, back into the paddock, into the transporter, shut the doors and go.
Yeah.
And by the time the crowd realised what had happened, well, we were all safe on in our hotels.
Okay.
And they divided the prize money equally.
Very good.
Talking of money, those days there was starting money, and it's what all the drivers lived on. I remember one story in Hockenheim. I was sitting with another team owner in the organisers' area, waiting for them to count the gate money before they knew how much starting money could be dished out. And that person was Frank Williams.
Very good. Yeah.
Frank was an amazing character. In Bogota, you asked me about other ones. In Colombia, there was a 2-race series, and it was very well supported with drivers. And Frank Williams had a car entered for Pierce Courage, but the high altitude was a problem for the power of the engines, the lack of oxygen. And Frank had 2 new March Formula 2 cars, but the chassis were cracking. So he took the 2 cars as hand luggage, flew back to Bicester to have them repaired, and flew back out again to Bogota with the repaired chassis. But typical Frank, being mercenary, he got us to pay him to bring out new jets for the fuel injection system.
Oh.
Because to adjust for the lack of air.
Yeah.
So it paid for his journey with the chassis.
By God. Bit of a wheeler dealer at that point, obviously.
He was an amazing character.
So that was Colombia.
Yeah.
So we have, where else did you race?
Monza was a particularly interesting one.
Yeah.
I learned one lesson there. It was pre-chicane days, and it was just a flat-out pretty well circuit, apart from a few corners. But there was one particular corner, the Curva Grande, at the end of the main straight.
Yeah.
And the story was you could take it flat, but you never take a driver's word for taking it flat. They tended to sometimes not realise they were actually doing a small lift.
Yeah.
So I was neck and neck with Tino Brambilla in the Works Ferrari. And as we came to the Curva Grande, he looked over at me and shook his head. And I realised he was telling me not to lift, because he was getting the benefit of my toe. Yeah. So I thought, well, you can't go through the Curva Grande flat. But my mind was telling me you can't. So I said, well, I'm going to override my mind. And I kept flat. And I got around the corner. Next time round, I thought, hey, what fool would lift to go through the Curva Grande? The difference was, he being a Works Ferrari Formula 1 driver, had a limit slightly ahead of my limit. So once I knew that he could do it, I thought, well, so can I. And I lifted my limit up a notch. And I realized that this is the difference between an amateur and a real professional.
Okay.
And talking of professional, I had the problem that I had to get a plane back to Limerick every Monday and try and do a week's work before getting a plane back out to circuit on Thursday. My father was very sympathetic and helpful, but the professional drivers would go from circuit to circuit and spend a day testing and practicing. So really, it was the most unfair, unlevel playing field.
Yeah.
But that didn't matter because I was having a ball.
Yeah.
And really enjoying it. The other significant foreign circuit was the Nürburgring, North Shaft.
Oh, yeah.
Jackie Stewart called it the Green Hell. My first experience there was I got intoxicated by, I think they called it the swallow curve. It was a series of downhill, left, right, left, right, left, right, that you could virtually go straight down. Clip left, clip right, clip left. And then at the end, you came to a high slope. And when I was going up that slope, having been intoxicated by going so fast, when I went to press the brake pedal, I couldn't. The G-force wouldn't allow my foot to actually press the brake pedal. And also, I didn't know whether the road went left or right at the top of the hill. I guessed it might be right, and I was lucky because when the car landed, I was
you were airborne
ready
at this
for
stage.
Yeah, I was ready for a light. Now that's a synopsis of the Nürburgring. It's incredible. In those days, it was there were 186 corners. I think it was 18 miles around the mountains. No Armco. If you went off, you had trees and a big valley to go down. And it was in later years, and I was back there when they had removed the trees, and you could see what was behind them. In fact, there was nothing.
Yeah.
But it didn't seem so bad when the trees were there because you didn't know there was nothing.
You're better off not
behind.
knowing those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in 1970, the Formula One drivers refused to drive the German Grand Prix there. They said it was too dangerous. And that was serious because there were Germans who used to go there every year camping, and huge crowds used to turn up. And to tell them the race was going to be cancelled was terrible. And they transferred the Formula One race to Hockenheim, which is basically a featureless circuit, except the crowds were enormous. And they ran a Formula 2 race instead at the Nürburgring.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I happened to come in fourth, which I was very pleased about. And in modern day political correctness, I couldn't tell you I was upset because I was beaten by a lady.
Oh.
Into third place. Hannelore Werner. She was a local who for a living, drove people around the circuit.
Oh, yeah.
So she knew every inch. So that didn't make it seem quite so bad.
Yeah.
But I have a trophy which says German Grand Prix 1970, Nürburgring.
Excellent.
It doesn't actually have my name on it because they were engraved beforehand.
Yeah. Okay. That's nice to have.
Yeah.
Now, apart from your racing career, you're also a keen aviator and a keen boater or boating, sailing and cruising and that kind of stuff. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I know that when you bought this site, you got married around that time, was it? And you decided you were going to go on a bit of time off. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that. That introduced you to the boating and your business here, Derek Cruisers.
Yeah. I retired for good at the end of the 71 season. By now, there was a bank strike in 1970, which is very handy because you could write checks and know that they wouldn't be presented.
Yeah.
Until I was, I think about 6 months later, when the banks reopened, I was summoned to the manager and told, you wrote a check that was from a spare engine and you'd no money to meet it. And I said, no, you were closed when I came to make a lodgement.
Yeah, yeah,
But in 1971 there was no bank strike, so
yeah.
and I sold my Brabham and retired for good.
For the first time.
For the first time.
Yes. Yeah.
Back to settle down,
Yes.
and in '72 I decided I would go into boat hire charter. And I had purchased 2 premises in Spain, a place called Ampuria Brava, which was a new concept where inland canals were made, and you could buy a house or an apartment and have your boat moored at the end of your garden. And then I realized that the Shannon was about to take off, and cancelled the idea of going to Spain and bought a property in Killaloe. And I was very lucky because the German market was just beginning, and there were 11 flights from different parts of Germany into Shannon every Saturday, mostly coming to hire a boat. And in due course, my first year, I literally ran the business from the bank of the canal, and the Germans would arrive in their lovely new holiday outfits from the coach and say, "Where is the Dergline?" And I'd say, "Well, here." And they said, "Where?" I said, "Here, you're there."
You're there.
So it was hard work. And then the station house came on the market in Killaloe. I had bought the land to build my own marina, but even in those days, planning was so difficult and slow. And in the meantime, I had people coming to hire boats and had no proper premises. So the station house, the old railway station house in Killaloe, came in the market, and there was a great character, Harry Brann. I instructed Harry to bid for me, and with a limit. And he came back and said, "Oh, Brian, sorry, I didn't get it. I was outbid, and I went way above your figure. But," he said, "you can have the country club." This was part of the Lakeside Hotel, and it was a super premises on the water with jetties, swimming pool, sauna, solarium, 11 bedrooms, two lounges, and an office. So I said, "Go back quick and pay a deposit." And that was wonderful for 2 years. And then the existing marina, which Corma Cruisers were running, came in the market, and I bought that. And
So that became a very successful business for you.
yes, yeah.
And I know on the aviation side that you had a lake amphibian aircraft which you were able to fly out of off the lake here. And how did you get into the aviation then?
I was always keen to get a pilot's license, and even back in the early 60s, I started training, and then I couldn't afford to do that and race as well. And then in the 80s, I said, "This time I'm going to buy a plane so that I'll have to get a license." And I bought this American amphibian, and it was great for the business because if you get a breakdown on a boat up in Carrigan-Shannon, it was a 4-hour drive for a mechanic up and maybe a 10-minute fix of the job and 4-hour drive back. And I thought, well, the seaplane would be very handy. And it was. And I remember one occasion, the big chief from the German tour operator was over to see the various premises, and I picked him up at Sligo Airport in the amphibian and let him take the controls, which he was so thrilled to do. And anytime I saw a Dergline boat, I would drop down low so that he would see it was a nice Dergline boat. And if it was a competitor's boat, I'd stay up high.
Yeah, say that's yeah.
And that went down well. And then I decided I needed a helicopter. And
But you had a hangar, didn't you? You were able to
yes, I could land
come off the water
in front of the marina, and then put the undercarriage down and drive up into the hangar, and then reverse the process. The thing to remember was, if you're landing in an airport, that you did need to put the undercarriage down.
yeah. You were landing on water again.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wouldn't be the first time somebody did that.
And we water skied behind the airplane.
Did you?
Actually, we did a television program, Pay the Price. I think you had 90 seconds to do a forfeit that a member of the public would give you to challenge. And Mark, my son, he said he would ski behind the plane if I could fly it. And the problem was I couldn't see behind me.
Yeah.
So my second son was in a little rubber duck in front of me. And because I had no brakes, of course, in the plane, so you had to hope that it would stop in the right spot where he was in the water.
Oh, yeah.
And then Paul, when he was hooked up to the plane, then Paul would say, go. And blindly, I didn't know what was happening behind. I would hit the throttle and take off. And as long as I landed again, within 90 seconds, Mark didn't have to pay the penalty, which was to walk down Ennis Main Street singing pop songs.
Yeah.
So it saved the day for him.
But you touched on then the helicopter, you started flying helicopters.
Yeah. And funny enough, I was sort of attracted to flying back to Goodwood. I still enjoy going over to the festival.
Festival, yeah. A longish trip in a helicopter.
Yeah, make a fuel stop in Exeter, but it just added to the enjoyment of the event.
And I had the pleasure of flying with you in the helicopter and going to the Flying Boat Museum, which you were involved with as well.
Yes.
In
Foynes.
In Foynes.
Yes.
And your business obviously was very successful.
Yes.
And now you can enjoy the fruits of that here with your beautiful house, and you're looking out on the shores of Lough Derg.
The lure of motor racing brought me back again. Mark was driving in Formula Ford and very successfully.
Yeah.
But I didn't like the tactics that were being used, this pushing off and so on. And I challenged the champion one day. I said, look, why do you have to be driving so
aggressively,
unfairly, aggressively? And he said, well, if you don't, you won't win.
Yeah.
So I said, I convinced Mark that we buy a Crosslé 9S sports car. Mm-hmm. And Crosslé were doing a fantastic series on the continent where they would deliver the car, about maybe 6 or 7 cars, to the circuit, and you just literally fly and drive. And we called it the Fun Team. Mm-hmm. And it was very successful. We won a 6-hour race in Magny-Cours, beating a Ford GT40.
Very good.
And we were we won a 3-hour race at Paul Ricard, I think it was. And that was great fun. And then after about 2 years of that, I retired for good. And
then what happened?
And then Bob Montgomery, a very nice chap. He was archivist in the RIAC, and he a very good author. He's published, I'd say 20 or 30 books, all on motoring.
Motoring, motorsport.
Yes, very knowledgeable.
Yeah.
And Bob had bought a Lotus 211 to race with his son, but his son hadn't the required license. He needed more races to get enough ticks for the license. And he asked me, would I fill in the meantime? And it turned out I filled in for the whole season. And that was great fun.
And the Lotus 211 was a modern day sports car, like a Lotus Elise or something.
Yeah, like an open version of it.
Yeah.
Lovely car to drive, very, very fast. And we were 3rd in the European Championship.
Excellent.
And it also brought circuits that I had never been to before, which amazed me. I had never driven in Spa until then. Yeah. And Oschersleben and quite a few. So it was a very enjoyable, because there was no pressure.
And that brings us then back to Crosslé.
Yes. Well, having retired for good again for the 3rd time.
Yes.
I saw advertised a Crosslé 19F that was a 1970 Formula 2 car that Ken Files drove.
Yeah.
And I would have competed against in Mondello and places like that. So I foolishly thought I was now in my 70s. I could still be as fast as I was. And I wasn't. I was about 4 seconds a lap in general slower.
Were you?
So 40 years, I reckon you lose a second
Every decade. Yeah. So that's a beautiful car, obviously, and you campaigned that in the UK series.
Yes.
What was that?
Historic
series
sports
called?
car series.
Yeah.
With success. I was third in the championship 1 year, the racing car series.
So there was a lot of older guys obviously driving that, because they were all after losing a second every 10 years.
Well, that's what I thought. In actual fact, because it's so difficult now to get racing to go up the ladder, particularly in the UK where it's such a popular sport, the young chaps, the whiz kids, were now driving historic cars.
Driving the old cars, yeah.
Because it was easier to get entries,
Yeah.
and they could make a name for themselves. So rather than it being an old gentleman's sport, it was really, really competitive.
Yeah.
And thoroughly enjoyable.
But you did say that you, some weekend that you were racing, the car was wrecked.
It was the Oulton Park Gold Cup, which was for, like you'd call Boss now, Formula 5000, Formula 2, Libra.
Libra, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a very famous race. And I was going quite well, and towards the end of the race, a chap Ian Ashley, who I had raced back in the Formula 2 days, and like me had decided he'd come out of retirement and have a go again, but he misjudged the width of his back tyres, and overtaking me at Oulton Park, his back tyre hit, as he overtook me in this Formula 5000 Lola, much faster car.
Okay.
His back tyre didn't fit through the gap, and I spun off, ended up with one wheel, like in the Phoenix Park of my car. His rolled a number of times. Wow. It was a complete write-off, so I'm very sorry for him, because it was the end of his racing. And I was so impressed with Crosslé, because it was bank holiday, Easter, I think, or anyway, bank holiday weekend, and Arnie Black of Crosslé was there, and he said, "Brian, this car could be fixed if we could get the parts." And he said, "I'll phone the factory." Well, he couldn't phone the factory because they were closed for the bank holiday, but he phoned one of the mechanics in the factory and gave him a list of about 100 parts that were needed to repair the car. And the chap went into the factory, got all the parts off the shelf. Now, this was a 40-year-old car, yeah, and the parts were on the shelf for it. Flew to Birmingham. I picked him up in Birmingham, and they worked through the night, rebuilt the car, and I was able to do it. Well, I didn't actually race it the next day because it handled so terribly badly. If you press the throttle, it turned to the right, and if you press the brake, it turned to the left. But the fact that they could do this in a bank holiday weekend and have all the parts at hand, there's no other car manufacturer of any kind in the world could do that.
Yeah.
And they're the world's longest continuously running racing car constructors.
Of course, it was a family-run business, essentially,
yes,
wasn't it?
Unfortunately, John Crosslé has since died,
yeah,
but from a very small factory in Hollywood in Belfast,
yeah,
they produced wonderful cars.
They did.
And world champions that went on, Nigel Mansell, to name but one, Eddie Irvine, not world champion, but Formula One drivers. Mm-hmm. There was a time when if you didn't have a Crosslé in Formula Ford, you couldn't win.
Yeah.
Amazing company.
Now, Brian, you have a scrapbook, what I call it, here, of a lot of your newspaper cuttings and articles, etc., and photographs. So we'll just have a little look at it and see, go through some of the photographs. Now that's Brian Cullen Racing. What car is that?
That's the Brabham PT23C with Evan Hughes.
Oh, yeah.
And it's actually the photos taken at the beginning of the season when we just built the new body on it.
That was the Thames Trader, is
that
right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And it was had just been sprayed, and we were in our Ford jackets.
Oh, yeah.
And our Dunlop tires and the Ford engine, and we were about to head off to Truxton for our first race.
Very good, very good.
That's an interesting one. That's my mum, and to celebrate successes of a year, I'd say it was probably the 65 type of period. She made this cake, and each wheel was the size of the cake in itself.
Oh, yeah.
And we had a little party at home to celebrate the season.
I see the 4 trumpets.
Yes.
Yeah, very good. Now, this is a racing, looks like Mondello.
That I would think is Mondello. It's me in the Brabham.
Are you in the lead there?
I would think so.
Well, you'd say so anyway, wouldn't you?
Well, I could be lapped.
Yeah.
No, I think it was. That's Ken Files in
Yeah.
a Lotus. That's Bill Gowdy, I think.
Yeah.
In the Formula 3, later Brabham, the 29, as opposed to my 23, see. And that looks like Brian Nelson in a Lola T60.
Yeah. Okay. Now,
Oh,
yes,
that's what was left of my car.
please explain, as I say.
Having visited Orstenoutron early in the morning, that's what was left of it. The chassis was actually bent as well.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
very little of it. I still have the steering wheel, which I was able to straighten, but the car ended up in a field. I sold it to Billy Percy and Clock Jordan, and he was going to make an autocross special out of it, but he never did. And it's now racing today and worth about £100,000.
Yes.
In Formula Ford and Formula Junior.
Is it?
In the UK. The chap who owns it now came to see me a few years ago, and he pleaded with me to sell him the steering wheel.
Yeah.
But he had repaired it completely.
Okay.
And
that's Dennis Hogan's engine.
And that's Dennis
It
Hogan's.
caused all the trouble.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's some more of it, is it? Is that another picture of it?
Yeah, no, it's not as bad as it looks because the pieces were taken from put into a
and
pile.
that's the drive shaft that
that's-
acts as the upper link
Yeah.
and the bottom wishbone then.
Yeah.
Today, cars have 2 wishbones,
That's
top
right.
and bottom
Yeah.
of the upright.
It was obviously this side, I'd say.
Yeah.
And that's one of the radius arms and the drive shaft. Yeah.
Okay.
It's been the Circuit of Ireland.
Oh yeah, that's a bad photograph. Yeah.
That's
CTI, is that yours?
CTI 650.
Yeah.
It was a Cooper, red with a black roof.
Okay.
That was that. I think that was me. That was Betty Hofkirk, I think, in the park.
In the park, yeah. Looks like the park.
And I think that was Alec Poole.
Okay.
I think.
You're in good company.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this one, the Triumph Spitfire.
Dunboyne. Yeah. Coming
With,
to the village.
Nelson Healy Sprite.
Yeah.
and-
Huey, I think.
And a TR2
TR3
or
and
3.
2, yeah.
Yeah.
2, yeah.
Triumph. Okay. Of course, the Dunboyne was very famous racetrack because, the spectators used to turn out in droves for those events.
It was a very dangerous event.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, no, that's a nice photograph.
Me in the Brabham BT23 and Tommy Reed, I think, behind in the BT29, the later
And
later
Mondello,
version. Mondello.
by the looks of it, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, and this one, a hill climb photograph.
Yeah, I think that was my first weekend with it. We towed it down from
Crosslé
Dublin.
20F?
No,
No, sorry, Lotus 20F.
And you see,
20.
without the top link in the suspension.
Oh, yes, yeah. Looks so unusual today, doesn't it? Narrow cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We towed it with the tow rope from Dublin to Lisbon.
With a tow rope from Dublin?
Yeah.
Wow. Yes. What about this one?
That's Jack Files, the Hornet.
Woolsey Hornet.
Yeah, he had great traction out of it, that drum.
That was a hairpin bend.
It was
Kind of,
not
was it?
kind of, yeah, triangular more, and I could go much faster on the straight, but traction out of the corners was a problem for me.
And that's your 20...
BT20.
The Lotus 20.
Lotus 20.
At the time,
Yeah.
Now, I didn't see this one before. you're obviously a fit man at the time.
Well, I was very keen on water skiing. That was a lethal weapon. It was the forerunner of kites, which now are very controllable. This had no control. If the kite went sideways, you had to make sure that you stayed at right angles. So you had to let your feet go out this way. Otherwise, it would just do a flip over.
Flip over.
And I remember one day doing it at the championships, there was a crosswind and it blew me towards the Lakeside Hotel. And the boat driver had to accelerate to get me up higher to clear the top of the hotel.
Wow.
And another time...
And suitable sponsorship as well.
Yes. Yeah. In a Skillen, there was a very strong wind and went up and you would shake your head or nod your head whether you wanted up or down. And the only control was the boat driver.
Yeah.
And I was up, the rope was almost vertical and the boat had come to a stop. And I was still up there in the wind.
Yeah, couldn't get you down.
Couldn't get me down. But the danger was if the wind died at all, the boat driver had to pick up the speed very quickly. So it was a lethal thing.
To put wind in your sails, so to speak.
Absolutely.
We have that one. We have that one. And that's the Trine Spitfire again.
Spitfire on the hill climb.
On the hill climb, yeah.
Well, there was a Circuit of Ireland rally there. Well, it wasn't the Circuit of Ireland, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, you're splashing through the water here, I see.
Rat drum, I think, yes.
Yeah. And Phoenix Park.
Phoenix Park, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See now what we have. The Lotus hill climb.
Yes.
Dungarvan.
Yes, I would think. Yeah.
I know them all, don't I? Well, some of them anyway. Some of them I don't know them all. I know some of them. So there's loads of cuttings. You used to keep all these.
Yes, I still have 3 boxes to sort through.
Wow. Yeah. And saloon cars are sports cars and racing cars all running together.
Yeah, I don't know what event that was.
Good wins
Phoenix
for
Park.
Brian Cullen on both days.
All right. Yeah, Phoenix Park.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah. That's Dunboyne.
Is that?
That is anyway. Kelly's.
Yeah. And what? Oh, this is the Lotus.
The Lotus, yeah.
Yeah.
My sister's V850.
Oh, that's the V850 that you blew the engine in.
Yeah.
Very good. Or not so good.
No, it's good the next day. Eagleston, that was a lovely circus. In the Royal Highland showgrounds.
Is that still?
Yes.
Is it track? Yeah.
Not very often used.
Yeah. Now you were obviously featuring on covers of magazines as well. Ireland's Motorsport Mag.
Yeah.
Bishop's Court, would you believe? Bishop's Court race program cover.
And again, you can clearly see there's no link on the suspension.
And Cullen still leads the Sexton list, and that was July 66.
66, yeah.
Yeah. Bishop's Court is actually a fabulous track.
Yes.
Yeah, high speed.
Quite fast, yeah.
Oh, it is, yeah. Oh, yeah, being presented with a trophy.
I was Irish Junior Jump Champion and wearing my BRM blazer.
Oh, and that was ski jumping, was it?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, it looks like the Phoenix Park.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, and this is your 850 again?
Yeah.
Was this the Works 850 you were driving?
I don't know. I think probably not. Because I think we'd taken the windscreen out to get a better flow of air.
Flow of air, yeah. Less drag.
Yes.
Yeah. Them were the days, weren't they?
They were.
See now where we're.
And there's Dennis Hogan.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. Dennis Hogan, who I know very well.
Yes.
And the one BC, Brian Cullen, or Bring Cash.
Yes.
Yeah, there's her crash again. Oh, that's you have a new bodywork, or you've replaced the bodywork on the top of the car here.
Yes.
That was it. Was that the Brabham?
No, Crosslé.
Oh, was it? Oh, that's a 6F.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, an early one.
Yeah.
Good little car though.
But you obviously had an altercation
Yes.
because
Yeah.
of the change of bodywork.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leinster Trophy meeting at Bishop's Court.
I think that's Pat
Pat Hogan.
Hogan, yeah.
Yeah, and the Anglia actually could very well be, though I think it's the Galway Reg now. Dennis campaigned in Anglia, Dennis Hogan campaigned in Anglia. Back in the day, as they
Remember
would
him
say.
well. He was quick in it too.
Through a hill climb. Busy weekend. Of course, there's a couple of years of data here from your mostly single-seater days,
Yes.
and of course, horrible weather.
Yeah.
Phoenix Park, I suppose.
Yes.
And there's Richie Healy.
That's
I
right.
recognise him.
Yep.
Richie Healy from Malahide.
Yep.
Yeah.
We had some great dices.
Oh, and there's you.
No,
is
that's
it without
Richie.
the bodywork?
No, I think that's Richie. Yeah,
It is Richie Healy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Richie Healy. And
Rat drum.
you did a lot of competitions, didn't you?
Yeah, I did really.
That's a great picture.
Yes. That was the first event with the problem, and that's the scrutineer.
Oh yes. Yeah. Which drives you?
Oh no, sorry, that's Frank Keane.
That's Frank Keane. Yeah.
But it was
A hill
at
climb
that
of
event
note.
that he said, "Don't come again without a proper drive."
And
drive
famous
up."
BMW dealer
Yes,
in Dublin.
yes, good driver too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a great dice. Chris Summers, he did V8, a Cooper, I think it was, and I could catch him in the corners, and then he'd catch me in the straights.
Oh, yeah.
And we
It's a
swapped
big V8,
positions right
just-
through the whole race.
Fly by. Yeah. Yeah. And Motor Drum Hockenheim. 1968.
I must have had the Lola then.
Yeah. There's a gaggle of cars there. Rint calculates and wins. That's the. Is that Formula 2?
Yep.
Slipstreaming. They're calling it. Yeah, they're saying
there were
slipstreaming.
no
Along the
chicanes.
Hockenheim Straight. Here, Oliver has the lead. Rodriguez and Rint.
I never liked Oliver.
Did you not?
He, on the boat with the Lola going to Hockenheim. Now, it was an unsuitable car. He was driving the Works Formula 2 Lotus, and he ridiculed us. Oh, quick to drive that joke. And we'll show you someday. Yeah.
And did you?
Oh yeah, I often beat him.
Yeah.
But
Where was he
and
from,
Tim
Jackie Oliver?
Schenken, English.
Was he?
And Tim Schenken from Australia.
Oh, yeah.
He was another one I didn't like. He had an MGB GT, which was quite a nice car at the time.
Yeah.
And in Barcelona, this girl approached me and said, was I English? I said, no way, I'm Irish. And I said, why? She said, well, I've an old Ford 105E Anglia, and I got a pass for 6 months to bring it to Spain, but I'm staying in Spain now, and I have a boyfriend in Spain, so the customs are going to take the car unless I could find somebody who will drive it back to England.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I will. Now, imagine you that nowadays, because it could be full of drugs and you'd be carrying.
Did you pack this car yourself?
Yeah, exactly. And they gave me money for petrol, a whole lot of spare parts. I had my girlfriend with me who was going to come back in the transporter, which is a two-seater cabin, the three of us, and I wasn't looking forward to the journey from Barcelona back to the UK.
Long drive?
A long drive. So I said, yeah, delighted. And arrived anyway to Zolder, I think it was. And as I just pulled into the paddock, in comes Tim Schenken in his MGB GT. And he said, you didn't take that piece of crap from Barcelona, did you? I said, yes, I did. And I was here before you. He'd refused it already.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you did a bit of writing as well, Brian, in the
did.
mags.
I
Did
did,
you?
yeah.
Sporting mags.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Irish Tatler and Sketch and Limerick Post
And you did a bit of aviation writing as well, didn't you?
I did in Irish what's the one? Mark Dwyer runs it. Anyway, I was helicopter editor.
Oh, yeah.
For a while.
Yeah, yeah. And what did that mean? You just wrote up articles?
I wrote an article for each month. Yeah.
Each month, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Excellent.
But I did a lot of motoring journalism. I did a weekly column in the Echo. So every time a new car would be launched, we'd get invited, and they were lavish events.
Were they?
All over the world, yeah.
Yeah. And did you get paid for that?
I got paid by the paper.
Yeah.
But the manufacturers didn't pay us, of course.
Yeah.
But they paid us in kind, best hotels and the best of everything.
Okay.
And each manufacturer tried to outdo the next. Lovely story in Eindhoven, Ford testing track. It was banked. And Michael O'Carroll and I were having a discussion about slipstreaming and the effect of it.
Yeah.
So I said, Michael, I'll show you now. So we each had a cortina, and I was behind Michael, and straight away we were able to go faster. Yeah. And I thought, well, if I actually push him, we could probably even go faster still. So I
nudged him.
I actually nudged him, and it was like one car with two engines.
Yeah.
And we were flying around the bank track, flat out. And one of the Ford chaps came to me and said, now, we don't care how you drive our cars on test, but I must tell you, the English fellows are very upset that you overtook them.
Yeah. Great stuff.
That again?
Oh, yeah. There's Hogan and... Who's Mrs... That's your mother,
That's
is
Mum,
it?
yep.
Your mother. It's J. Cullen. Oh, yeah, a bit of a spin here.
Bill Gowdy.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Merry
At Dunlop.
Mondello Christmas. Did they have a Christmas meeting?
Yeah,
I
think it was a Boxing Day.
Oh, yeah. Let me try from Mondello meeting again.
That was the opening. 68.
Did you write this yourself?
No. No.
You got an awful lot of mentions, Brian.
Yeah. Dickie Rock.
Oh, Dickie Rock. Yes. What was that? What was that to do with?
He was presenting me with the Sports Star of the Year, I think.
Oh, you were Cork. You're the Examiner.
That was another one. This is the Limerick Sports Star. Then I was the Cork as well.
What was that? 19 what?
I would say that was probably 65 or 6. Oh no, 69. Evening Press, 69.
Oh.
9, isn't it? Yeah.
And that was Sports Star among all the sports people.
Yeah.
Some achievement.
Yeah.
Some achievement. Well, Brian, I think we've covered most of your motorsport life, your business life, your pleasure life, which are boating, in your flying career, and I hope the listeners enjoyed that. And I'd like to thank Brian profusely for letting us into his house to conduct these interviews, and also to Eleanor, his wife, for looking after us.